Episode 3 of The Last of Us is a stark deviation from what we've seen so far. The first 2 episodes show the dark and depressing world of the apocalypse. Episode 3 shows a more hopeful side of the apocalypse. Though Joel and Ellie get screen time to further expand their relationship, most of the episode focuses on 2 new characters, Bill and Frank, and their relationship over the course of the apocalypse. In my review of episode 1, I stated I wasn't going to make a comparison between the game and the show. However, given the stark deviation from the source material, I'm going to mention a few comparisons given the changes in the adaptation are vastly different than the game. The episode begins with Joel and Ellie on the outskirts of Boston as they make their way to Bill and Frank. Ellie asks a lot of questions, while Joel focuses on his surroundings, further showing she truly knows nothing about the world because she was born after the apocalypse.
You have stuff stashed here.
You ask a lot of goddamn questions.
Yes, I do.
This also further shows that Ellie lived a very sheltered life, likely due to growing up as an orphan, and that the education within the quarantine zones doesn't seem to focus on the old world, perhaps as a means for Fedra to control the younger population by limiting information. They stumble upon a fallen plane, which excites Ellie because obviously she's never been on a plane before. Joe expresses that flying in an airliner isn't all too great.
Didn't feel like it at the time. Get shoved into a middle seat, pay $12 for a sandwich.
Dude, you got to go up in the sky.
I like this scene because it establishes Ellie's naivety, that the idea of simply flying through the air is amazing, whereas Joel understands it's actually quite mundane and underwhelming. The scene transitions into Ellie asking how everything collapses so quickly. The previous episode hinted at how the infection spread so fast, but in this episode, Joel explains the most plausible theory, that the fungus was inside brands of food that was distributed across the world and that those who ate enough of the fungus inside the food were the first to be infected.
Best guess, cordyceps mutated. Some of it got into the food supply, probably a basic ingredient like flour or sugar. There were certain brands of food that were sold everywhere, all across the country, across the world. Bread, cereal, pancake mix.
There's no pancake mix in there!
We also witness a mass grave of skeletons. Joel explains how a week after the initial outbreak, soldiers gathered people from small towns to escort them to the quarantine zones. However, if the quarantine zones didn't have enough room, the soldiers killed them.
Why not just leave him be?
Dead people can't be infected.
I liked how this establishes the ambiguity of the morality in the show. If the quarantine zones were already full, then the soldiers could have left their people alone. However, the more people that there are, the more infected there are to contend with. What was the right decision? Should the soldiers have left the people alone and risked them being infected? Or is murdering them rather than risk a higher infection population the right call? I hope the show further carries this ambiguity. We then jump back in time to a week after the initial infection, and it is here where the show makes a stark deviation from the game. In the game, we only get a glimpse of Bill and Frank's relationship and never see Frank. The show decided to take time into exploring their relationship, which is what an adaptation should do. However, this episode can be a bit slow for viewers who haven't played the game, especially when you compare this episode to the previous 2. Soldiers are evacuating the people from Lincoln, Massachusetts. Bill is a survivalist who bunkers down in his basement while waiting for the town to be evacuated. Upon confirming the town is empty, he begins fortifying a small section of it. He raids various stores and houses for supplies, including a Home Depot to gather materials to make a makeshift electric fence. Along the perimeter, he sets up traps against humans and infected.
Oh!
Bill even goes as far as to turn on the town's natural gas energy plant as to provide himself with electricity. Sometime after fortifying the town, he finds a survivor, later revealed to be Frank, who has fallen into one of his traps. Frank explains that he came from the Baltimore quarantine zone, but that the quarantine zone is gone and that he's heading towards Boston. Though Bill's hostile towards Frank out of fear that providing Frank with food risks Frank telling other survivors about his location, Bill decides to shelter Frank. Eventually, the two fall in love and Frank decides to stay. Some years later, Frank reveals he's been in contact with Joel and Tess and invites them. Despite Bill's apprehension, Joel says that they can trade between each other because each party have resources that the other doesn't. This establishes how Joel and Tess know Bill and Frank.
There's stuff we have in the QZ that you don't have here. Books, medicine, machine parts. We can help each other and get that gun out of my face. That fence has got a year on it, tops. Galvanized wire already started to corrode. I can get you 10 spools of high tensile aluminum. Last you the rest of your life.
Joel also warns Bill that though he is protected from Fedra and Stray infected, sooner or later, raiders will show up. 3 years after their initial meeting, Frank shows he's been trading with Joel and Tess, such as trading strawberry seeds for a firearm. Later that night, raiders attack the town and set off Bill's traps. A gunfight takes place, but Bill's traps kill the raiders. However, Bill is shot and wounded. Closer to the present, Frank and Bill are still alive, though Frank is suffering from a terminal illness that leaves him in a wheelchair. Frank states he's lived long enough and wishes to end his life on his own terms. Reluctantly, Bill agrees. They have one last romantic dinner together. However, Bill reveals the wine they drank is laced and explains he is old and fulfilled, that Frank was his purpose. They both go into their bedroom to die in each other's arms. Sometime later, Joel and Ellie arrive to find the house empty. Ellie finds a note left behind by Bill, stating all of his supplies are Joel's and that the people like him exist to protect people close to them. After stating for Joel to use his supplies to protect Tess, Joel goes outside to once again grieve over the loss of Tess and now grieve over the loss of Bill and Frank. Confirming Bill's truck has a functioning car battery, Joel establishes rules for Ellie to follow and that they are heading to Wyoming to find his brother Tommy. Tommy used to be a firefly and might know the location of other fireflies. While preparing for their journey, Ellie finds a gun and secretly stashes it in her bag. With the car battery now charged, Joel and Ellie leave Lincoln. Though the slowest episode so far, we get a glimpse of some hope in this depressing world. Civilization has fallen with most of the world in ruin and filled with infected. Raiders travel the land and survivors who can make it to a quarantine zone are subjected to totalitarian rule. The story of Bill and Frank shows that there is still hope in the world and there is something to fight for. This reinforces Joel and Ellie's relationship, that now Joel has something to fight for, that perhaps his purpose is to now protect Ellie and to take her to the Fireflies in hopes a cure can be developed. Please comment below as I'd like to hear your own thoughts about episode 3. Don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Deviant and thanks for watching.